Water is perhaps one of the most universally accepted as well as sought after resources here in the world. Ancient civilizations have been built around it, and the true beauty of water can't really be understated. And yet, for some reason, it doesn't come without its own set of dangers. Flooding, as well as water damage, can be an incredibly dangerous and really interesting part of the world that we live in. And even my own New York City isn't quite resistant to the everlasting effects of water damage. And so in today's video, we ask the age-old question, can I waterproof my Pokemon card collection? Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about waterproofing my Pokemon card collection and how you can do the same. In today's video, friends, specifically, we're going to go over quite a few different topics, but I also did some real-life demonstrations to hopefully show you how you can go about waterproofing your Pokemon card collection. Now, first things first, we should probably talk about why this is important. And as you can see on screen right now, our good friends at Forbes actually went ahead and made some pretty interesting statements regarding water damage. And it says that every year, about 1 in 50 homeowners will file a water damage or freezing claim, accounting for almost 24% of all homeowner insurance claims, according to the Insurance Information Institute. The average cost of a water damage claim is about $10,900. Now, if you tack that on with our friends over at FEMA, who, according to testimony, said that there was approximately $17 billion annually between 2010 and 2018 in flood damage costs, I think the story begins to start telling itself. Long story short, although water is an incredibly valuable resource, and although it's something that, for the most part, humanity needs to survive, it can also be incredibly damaging as well as dangerous. And the truth of the matter is, for a hobby like ours, which is primarily made of paper, water typically doesn't run a very good reputation. Water damage can completely eviscerate Pokemon card collections, and the truth of the matter is that as careful as you are, or perhaps as not applicable as flood damage may be depending on where you live in the world, here's the raw truth of the matter. Every house, every apartment building, and every residential abode has a water pipe in it. And that water pipe can freeze, it can crack, it can become loose, it can break. And when that happens, there's a lot of water in places that there really shouldn't be. And that's why this is important. Building in and being conscious of where water lines run in your home, as well as making sure that your collection can be at least splash proof, if not entirely waterproof, can be a huge step to protecting many important investment and collectible pieces that you may have in your collection. And that's why today's video is not only relevant, but also incredibly important to any collector out there who's thinking of being in this hobby for the long run. Now, of course, whenever we talk about risk, the questions regarding trade-offs always come into play, and this is something that we've explored in previous videos as well. Basically, the more security you want against a particular risk, there's usually some type of trade-off that you have to give. And in today's video, those two equations are cost versus security and convenience versus security. And this is really the framework under which we're going to come to understand waterproofing a Pokemon card collection. So, if you're looking at the screen right now, you'll see that there is an orange line that is running in a general upwards direction. And if you look at the axes, you'll see that cost is represented on the Y and security on the X. This would indicate that the more security you want, the higher the cost usually is. Similarly, if you look at the purple line, you'll find that convenience is graphed on the Y and security on the X, and the line is generally downward facing, meaning the more security you want, the less convenient the solution usually is. So let's take some real life examples of that. Let's say you wanted a completely watertight underground bunker. Guess what? That's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be super secure, but at the same time, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Probably more money than most people have readily disposable to spend on something like that. Similarly, if we look at the convenience equation, we arrive at perhaps a similar natural disposition. For example, if you want to be able to easily access your cards, you may be tempted to keep them at home. However, home, as mentioned before, has a lot of water pipes running through it that can freeze, crack, and break. If you put them in a safety deposit box where a bank virtually guarantees that no water damage can happen and fully insures against it, the convenience is severely impacted. You can no longer just walk to your closet and look at your Pokemon card collection. Instead, you have to get out, go to the bank, get your safety deposit box key, go there during normal business hours, etc., etc. So those cost and convenience trade-offs typically result in higher ends of security. Where do we want to be on this graph, you might ask? The answer is ambiguous. It depends on a couple of things. Obviously, different people are willing to tolerate different amounts of risk. As I mentioned before, some folks may live in areas that simply aren't prone to flooding, while other folks may live in areas that are perpetually flooded. And as a result of that, you may have different levels of tolerance for different types of risks. The other thing to bear in mind is how much money are you willing to reasonably spend on this stuff, and how inconvenienced are you trying to be at any given point in time. Those are all very important considerations that can dramatically impact where and how you want to be. Interestingly enough, the one thing that I did want to mention is a situation where security is incredibly high, cost is incredibly low, and convenience is incredibly high. That's basically what I would call a unicorn event, because it technically shouldn't happen. It would break the rules that we've established here. And I will admit that these rules are to be applied generally, right? Generally speaking, cost and security have a direct relationship, convenience and security have an indirect relationship. But there are occasions where you can come up with solutions as well as different creative approaches to problems in the trading card hobby and addressing certain types of risks to your trading card collectibles that, by and far, break these rules. And when that happens, that's ideally the sweet spot that you want to be in. Otherwise, you'll just have to balance how inconvenienced you're trying to be, as well as how much money you are trying to spend in order to protect your Pokemon card collection. Now, with that said, and a solid framework in place, I briefly wanted to then talk about the test that I've assembled for you all today, and this was actually super fun. So, I ended up in a situation where I had to really kind of think about what I was trying to test, and I figured there are really 3 good tests that I think we can look at in order to see, can I waterproof my Pokemon card collection? Obviously, if I can, you can. All you have to do is use the same products that I use. And in a situation where, I don't know, I'm not able to waterproof my Pokemon card collection, you should probably stay away from those items and avoid them like the plague. So, first things first. Test number 1 is going to be a high pressure water stream. Basically, I'm going to take my hose, turn the water all the way up, and use a high pressure stream of water to see if I can break through the barrier of the different items that we are testing in today's video. If they pass test number 1, meaning they held watertight for that test, we're going to do a float test. The float test is really simple. We're going to see if the items float. Because if you live in an area that's prone to flooding, or even if you have a basement that could potentially get flooded if a water line broke, the idea is that we want to see if your collectibles are going to sink or if they're going to float on top of the water line, because that can be the difference between being able to salvage some of your collectibles and losing everything and having to write it all off as destroyed. And finally but not least, if the float test is passed, we'll go ahead and do a sink test. Even though the item floats, what happens if it sinks? We're going to apply some pressure and keep it underwater for a whopping 10 minutes and see if the water seal gets broken and if collectibles can be destroyed that way. A super brief note before we go ahead and get started. Although I am not a fan of putting any Pokemon card products in harm's way, today's video is meant to be exploratory and it's meant to be informative and educational. I'm in a situation where I can at least kind of afford to have this stuff destroyed in the event of some catastrophic failure, and that might not be true for everyone watching this video. So, Although there is a risk to these Pokemon cards, I'm happy to bear that risk, and I'm happy to do this so that others who may be in a situation where they simply can't afford to take these risks are able to learn from my mistakes and, more importantly, benefit from what I'm able to learn in today's video. I don't particularly take joy in putting this stuff up, as I do realize there are tons of folks out there in the world right now with no Pokemon cards or having trouble finding them on store shelves, but do note that this is for educational purposes. And I do think that the learning outcomes that we'll see from today's video are incredibly valuable, and more importantly are worth the cost of these products, because they can save countless of other collections, as well as all of the sentimental value that those collections hold to the various collectors and hobbyists in this hobby. So first things first, we have the candidates. As you can see on screen right now, we have this The Good Stuff waterproof and fireproof bag. Hint, hint, we're going to test the fireproofing a little bit later on. Now, one thing that I noted about this particular item is that it's actually very waterproof. There is a hydrophobic coating on the outside of the bag that basically just lets water run off of it, kind of like a duck's back. So all things considered, I will compliment at least the preliminary construction of this bag, because it does appear to do the job of being hydrophobic, which is a good thing. We want this if we want a waterproof bag to store our collectibles in. Next up, I actually wanted to test a Ziploc bag. And many of you might say, well, that's kind of crazy because this is probably worth like 10 cents. Yes, it is, and I've used it extensively in my shipping in the past, and guess what? Never had a collectible ruined because of rain, and I've had packages left out in the rain. My plan is to simply see if it'll stand point, because if it does, it's a unicorn. So next up, we have the contents that are going to go into the bag. So as you can see, I'm opening up the Ziploc, and we've got a few things that are going in here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the intention here is to legitimately test if these things are going to be waterproof with Pokemon cards in them. So we've got this Rebel Clash blister. You know, you can imagine things might be smaller or bigger. Here's a Vivid Voltage blister, just a different size and format. You got a Shining Fates pack, and you have a Population 1 of 1 Metagross Celestial Storm Hollow that's probably worth $10,000 or more. I know what I have, trust me guys. Anywho, all of that goes into the bag, and obviously we're then going to go ahead and zipper that fella up. Before we do, take a look at this blue paper. This blue paper is really interesting because when it gets exposed to water, as you can see on screen, it changes color drastically. So this is one of the ways that we're going to test to make sure that moisture has not permeated the seal of the, two candidates. So as you can see, I'm basically chucking some of that paper in there. Hopefully it'll also protect the items in case of failure. And then, because I'm a masochist, I also decided to put in a Vivid Voltage booster box. MSRP is easily over, well, MSRP would have been $144, but these things go for quite a bit of money online, and, definitely a lot of things riding the line here. I definitely want this bag to make it out alive, put it that way. I want everything to be completely dry. So as you can see, I'm going ahead and I'm just resealing the bag. I want to make sure that there's no opportunity for any type of, particular leakage. Here's the hose. So as you can see, there's a pretty high pressure stream. I'm actually going to end up using a combination of 2 different pressure streams just to kind of see if it makes a difference at all, or, if that's even applicable. This is going to be exposed to water for 1 minute with the high pressure stream, but I actually think it's actually pretty cool ASMR. So I'm going to stop talking now and let the water play through for the minute. So now we're back with the results. This is literally immediately right after. As you can see, the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is dry my hands. After handling the hose, what I realized is that my hands were going to be wet, and I didn't want to potentially ruin our particular results by opening the bag with wet hands. So the first thing I do is I go ahead and I grab the bag. I'm going to go ahead and give it a good shake. That'll help kind of knock off any excess water. On a cursory overview, looks like this was a complete success. A Ziploc bag was able to protect our items from a very high pressure stream. Bearing in mind that not only did I use a high pressure stream, but I also pointed it directly at the Ziploc seal. So ideally, it should have broken open and water should have flooded in there. It did not. As you can see, that paper towel is about as blue and regular as it gets, and there's really no reason to believe that the seal had been compromised in any meaningful way. Now I'm going to go ahead, because I handled the bag, and just dry my hands, and then immediately after that we're going to go ahead and get the bag opened up. And the one thing I'll note is that you are seeing some blue dots, but those blue dots are only due to the fact that water fell into the bag from when I opened it. I think we can conclusively say Ziploc did a really great job at keeping these items safe, and they will do for your stuff too. So the next thing would obviously be testing the waterproof bag. Now, given that the Ziploc was basically a hit and worked exactly as it should, I'm going to go ahead and actually seal this up and use it just as a next level of protection, right? If water gets into the other bag, who cares, because we know the Ziploc is there to protect it anyway. So obviously we'll go ahead and ready that up, and then we'll drop it in right over there. The next thing we'll do is go ahead and grab the bag, which I've kind of been splashing around with water anyway. As you can see, it looks to be very well constructed. We have this silvery material, which is the fireproofing material, and then we have this really nice zipper. Now again, I'm going to go ahead and just clean that off just to make sure no water drips in there that wouldn't have otherwise been in there. And ironically enough, I ended up just having to run a paper towel in there as well, just to kind of clean it out, prepare it, and make ready for the necessary placing of a new paper towel in there. So as you can see on screen, I'm going to go ahead and get the other bag cleaned up, and then we'll go ahead and drop it in there. Now this bag was purchased for $30, but the Ziploc bag is only about 10 cents. So we're talking about a pretty big price differential in order to see if this stuff is any good. So it'll be interesting to see how it stacks up. Here is our new blue paper towel. We'll go ahead and get that dropped in there in just a moment. As you can see, it's brand new, clean, no drops of water that have impacted it. And then we'll go ahead and just lay that right on top, because ideally we want to see how this bag is going to react to having water shot practically directly at the zipper. Now, it should be said, this bag is designed to have that flap closed on top of it. The problem is, whenever there is water being splashed in a house, it's not going to listen to what the bag's recommended instructions are. It's going to flow and fill every crevice that it possibly can. Let's get started. So we have the good stuff bag after it's barraged by water. I'm drying off my hands just as we did with the Ziploc bag. We obviously want to make sure that all of our tests are being done in a similar fashion. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is unzip the bag, and to my surprise, perhaps not really, after unzipping it and being able to get it opened up just a little bit, what I found is that the bag was completely flooded. So this was a huge failure on the part of the bag. Now, as I had mentioned, the bag is designed to have that flap closed on top of it, and in theory that would have stopped water from going in. But here's the problem. Water is not going to listen to manufacturers' recommended details. And the problem is that water would be blasting, whether it was to extinguish a fire, whether it was a pipe that was opened up. Water could potentially get blasted on this thing and still make its way into the bag. I think this is a huge failure on the part of this bag, and for this reason went ahead and failed the bag, meaning the good stuff bag will not be moving on from here on out for any of the other tests. This is really, really disappointing because although that hydrophobic coating is, nice and cool to have, at the end of the day, the bag itself simply did not hold up to the test. And this could be catastrophic. Imagine you had PSA 10 cards in this thing thinking they were safe. They simply would not be able to withstand a little bit of water. And you guys know how water is. It would flood, it would find a way to get in there. If it's not watertight, it's simply not good for you. Alright friends, so for the float test, this is, I think, relatively simple. It's a bucket of water. It's about, 20 to 22 inches deep. And the idea here is really, let's just see if it's gonna float, There are some reasons why things may float. There are other reasons why things may not float. If air is stuck in the bag, that will actually greatly benefit the buoyancy of this particular item. So as you can see here, we're doing the same exact prep work as last time. We take the Ziploc bag, open it up, dry it up, put in a brand new dry towelette just to see if it will get wet at some point throughout the process. At this point, I think Ziploc bags have proved their worth in gold. You'll notice that one little blue speck, that was a drop of water on my hand that I did not successfully remove. But we'll take a note of that just in case we only see that one little dot before we go ahead and open the bag. Now, as you can see, we're just going to go ahead and reseal, and this is a very important step in the process, making sure that seal is tight. And now we test. So here we have the bag, just literally like it was 10 seconds ago when I was just talking to you guys. Again, I'm paranoid, so I'll go ahead and seal it again. But this way we know for a fact that seal is tight, that seal is foolproof. And now we, quite literally do exactly what I said we would, which is just drop it and see if it will float. So enjoy the sped up clip of that happening. I ended up leaving it there for, if I'm not mistaken, about a minute and a half. So at no point did it seem like it was ever going to stop floating, and I decided to call the test at that. But the one thing that I wanted to make abundantly clear here is that this is a huge win for the Ziploc bag. The reason that is because imagine a situation where some part of your home, heavens forbid, got flooded, and that's exactly where your Pokemon cards were at. If they were in Ziploc bags that had a little bit of air, they would float to the top, and they would be completely water protected. So now, during any type of recovery or anything of that nature, you would simply be able to walk around in the flood, grab the items, or grab the Ziploc bags and put them into a larger bag. And that would be it. And that is a big reason for why Ziploc bags should become a new favorite item of yours for Pokemon and trading card games in general. So finally but not least is going to be the sink test, and I'm going to draw inspiration from the famous New York mafias of old and go ahead and give this thing a cement boot. What I found in my sort of independent testing is that this thing won't stay sunk. So even if I, come up with some wacky creative way of making sure that it stays down there, I ended up finding that a 12-pound weight would probably hold it down pretty successfully. So that's what I ended up using. A clay pot and then a very large weight. And as promised, I quite literally left it in there for 10 minutes in its entirety to stay underwater. Now, as we discovered in the previous test, this isn't even likely to happen. The truth of the matter is that as long as there's a little bit of air in there, it's going to likely float back up to the surface. But let's just pretend, for example, that you had each of these items in a Ziploc bag kept in a other container that was weighed down. As a result, it would get flooded and these would not be allowed to flood or to float to the surface. And so in a situation like that, what's really important and what's really necessary is understanding that, you're going to have to be in a situation where you're going to have to watch this stuff be underwater for some period of time. So the real question then becomes, is it going to keep that seal for an extended period of time? So after the very strenuous 10 minutes of waiting, I go ahead and remove the weight. I go ahead and watch the bag float to the top, again confirming our theory that as soon as it gets a chance to, it's going to buy you, and that's a very good thing. And again, cursory overview, Ziploc bag is really the champ today. The blue towelette is completely intact and everything looks exactly as it should be. There's no indication that there is additional water that has penetrated the surface of that seal. We'll go ahead and watch me dry my hands for maybe the last time in today's video. Again, don't want to introduce any artificial water there. I'm also going to go ahead and take the extra precaution of drying off the seal here. I don't want splashes of water on some of the stuff. I'll go ahead and even run my towelette through that little crease just to make sure no additional water gets dropped on there. And then finally but not least, maybe just to confirm what I'm already seeing through a transparent Ziploc bag, but we open it up and it's completely dry on the interior of that. That towelette only has droplets of water from either when the zip bag was opened or from my hand when I put it in. And all of the Pokemon cards contained inside are 100% protected, are 100% dry, and there is a beautiful Vivid Voltage booster box that, there it is, dry, protected, by a Ziploc bag. A $30 bag didn't do the trick, but guess what? A 10-cent Ziploc bag did, and all of the other collectibles are just equally as safe. So, finally but not least, friends, the real takeaways from today's video. The Ziploc bag is a real exception to the rule. As I'd mentioned, the general framework around cost and security and convenience and security are to be expected by most typical situations, but the Ziploc bag really kind of breaks the mold, especially when it comes to waterproofing your collectibles. It's a cheap option that is very, very convenient and offers very high levels of security based on the test that I was able to perform in today's video. One thing of note is that I use Ziploc bags extensively when I ship items to rainy areas, or when I'm expecting a package to stay out for some period of time. I take a Ziploc bag, put the item in, and then I'll go ahead and wrap it up in bubble wrap or do everything else. Again, super convenient because it's see-through or transparent for the most part, and so you can easily identify what's in there, which means not only is this a great option for shipping your items in, it's also a great option for storage. And as we've clearly demonstrated, if you leave a little bit of air in there, it then also has a bayou functionality to it as well, meaning it'll float above a water line in the event of some sort of catastrophic flood. So again, a really, really good positive part of using Ziploc bags in your collection. So for today's Ryan recommendation, I don't know if I'm ever going to use that term again, I would recommend you use Ziploc bags. Again, the tests really show the proof, and the proof is right there in the pudding. This is some pretty good stuff, and I definitely recommend you using it in order to protect your Pokemon card collections. But with all that said, friends, thank you again for checking out another video. I hope you learned something today, and if you did, feel free to leave a like on the video, and if you're not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Gengar Gang. As always, I appreciate your viewership. You could have been anywhere on the internet, but you chose to spend some time with me, and that means the world. As always, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. I hope you guys are having an amazing day, and we will talk soon. Peace.